Hey everyone, welcome back to English Inside Out. Today's episode starts with a question. And honestly, it might be one of the most important questions we've ever asked on this podcast. Because it's a question that affects almost every English learner, no matter where you're from, no matter how long you've been studying. And the question is this: why do some people seem to improve so much faster than others?
Yeah. And what's interesting is that the answer isn't always what people expect. Because when learners feel stuck, the usual reaction is, I need to study more. More grammar. More vocabulary, more exercises, more courses. More lessons.
Exactly. And sometimes those things help. But sometimes something else is missing. Something much more important.
Because here's what we've noticed. Many learners spend years studying English without really living with English.
Let me ask you something. Imagine two learners. The first person studies English for 3 hours every Saturday. They take notes, they complete exercises, they review grammar, and then they don't interact with English again until the following week.
Now imagine another person. They study less, maybe much less, but every day they listen to English for 15 minutes. They watch short videos, they read a few comments, they hear English while cooking, while walking, while commuting.
So here's the question. Who do you think will improve faster?
Most people assume it's the first person because they're studying more, but very often it's actually the second person. And today we're going to talk about why, because this episode is really about one simple idea. And once you understand it, it changes the way you think about learning English. Most learners treat English like a place they visit.
But fluent speakers live there.
Exactly. And that's the metaphor we're going to explore today. Because English is a lot like a house. Some people visit it once in a while, others moving. And the difference between those two approaches is much bigger than most people realize.
So today, we're not going to talk about advanced grammar. We're not going to talk about complicated study methods.
Instead, we're going to explore why daily exposure matters, why consistency beats intensity, why listening is more powerful than many learners think, and how to make English part of your everyday life.
And by the end of this episode, you may stop asking, how can I study more?
And start asking, how can I live with English a little more every day? All right, so let's start with the house, because once you understand that metaphor, everything else becomes much easier.
And you might start seeing your own learning habits very differently.
All right, so let's come back to this idea, English as a house. Because I think this metaphor explains something that many learners feel, but can't quite explain.
Yeah, most learners don't actually have a knowledge problem. They have an exposure problem.
Exactly. And those are very different things. Because you can know a lot about English without feeling comfortable in English. Imagine there's a beautiful house, a place you've always wanted to know better. You visit that house every Saturday. You spend 3 hours there. You walk through every room. You study the furniture. You take notes. You observe everything carefully.
And then you leave.
Exactly. And you don't come back for another week.
Now imagine a different person. Maybe they don't spend 3 hours there. Maybe they only spend 15 or 20 minutes, but they visit every day.
They sit in the living room. They walk through the kitchen. They open a few doors. They spend a little time there. And then they come back tomorrow and the next day and the next day. Who do you think will feel more comfortable inside that house after 6 months?
Probably the second person, even if they spent less time during each visit.
Exactly. Because familiarity grows through repetition, not intensity.
And language works the same way. A lot of learners think fluency comes from huge study sessions.
But fluency is often built through thousands of tiny encounters, tiny moments, tiny repetitions, tiny exposures.
A phrase you hear today, a phrase you hear again tomorrow, and then again next week.
Until one day, you don't need to remember it anymore. because it feels familiar. And I think this is something people underestimate, because when learners study, they're usually focused on remembering.
But when people become fluent, they're often relying on familiarity.
Exactly. Think about your own language. You don't stop to remember every sentence.
You simply recognize patterns, and recognition comes from exposure, not from force. Let's imagine you hear the phrase, "it depends," the first time. Maybe you notice it. The second time, it sounds a little more familiar. "15th time," you recognize it immediately. The 100th time, it feels completely natural.
And that's the hidden power of daily contact. You stop learning isolated words and start building familiarity with real language. But here's where many learners get stuck. They believe that if they're not actively studying, they're not learning.
Yeah, that's a really common belief.
Someone listens to a podcast while walking and they think, I'm not studying. Someone watches a video in English and they think, this doesn't count. Someone listens while cooking, while driving, while exercising, and they think real learning happens later.
But maybe that's exactly where real learning is happening. Because language isn't just information. Language is familiarity.
It's recognition, its patterns, its exposure. Think about a song you love. You probably don't remember the first time you heard it.
But after hearing it again and again, something changed.
The melody became familiar. The rhythm became familiar. The words became familiar.
And eventually, you knew parts of the song without trying.
Language often works the same way. So if we simplify everything we've discussed so far, fluency isn't built only through study. It's built through repeated contact, through familiarity, through daily exposure.
And that's why some people improve surprisingly fast, not because they're studying all day, but because English has become part of their daily environment.
All right. So now that we've talked about the difference between visiting and living with English, let's look at something even more important.
Because there's a reason daily exposure works so well, and it has everything to do with how the brain learns language.
All right. So now let's talk about something that surprises a lot of learners, because it feels almost too simple to be true.
Yeah, it's the idea that your brain can learn more than you think, even when you're not trying so hard.
Exactly. That and before anyone misunderstands. We're not saying you should never study. Of course, study helps.
But what we're saying is that learning doesn't only happen when you're sitting at a desk.
A lot of language learning happens quietly in the background, without you even noticing. Think about this. Have you ever walked into a cafe and there's music playing?
At first, you barely notice it. You're focused on something else. Maybe you're talking to a friend. Maybe you're working. Maybe you're checking your phone.
But after 20 minutes, something interesting happens. You suddenly realize, the melody.
Or you catch yourself humming part of the song.
Exactly. And the strange thing is, you weren't trying to learn it.
English can work the same way.
When English is present in your environment, your brain starts collecting information.
Sounds, rhythms, expressions, patterns.
And most of the time, you don't even realize it's happening.
Let's imagine someone listens to English podcasts every day, maybe while walking, maybe while cleaning the house, maybe while driving to work. That at first, they understand very low.
And honestly, that's usually the hardest stage, because people think, if I don't understand everything, this isn't helping. But understanding everything is not the goal.
Familiarity is the goal.
Exactly. Because before your brain can use a phrase, it needs to recognize that phrase.
And before it recognizes it, it needs to hear it many times. Let's take a very simple expression. The first time you hear it, you might not pay attention. The 5th time, you start noticing it. The 20th time, you expect it.
And eventually, you start using it yourself, not because you memorized it, but because it became familiar. I think one of the biggest mistakes learners make is ignoring this hidden stage.
Yeah, people want immediate results.
They want to hear something today and use it tomorrow.
But language doesn't usually work that way.
There's often a silent period, a period where your brain is collecting information, organizing patterns, building familiarity. It's a little like planting a seed.
You don't see anything happening at first.
But that doesn't mean nothing is happening.
A lot of growth happens underground before you can see it.
And language learning is often exactly the same.
And honestly, I think this idea can be very comforting because so many learners feel guilty. They think, I should be studying more. I should be doing more exercises. I should be making faster progress.
But maybe part of your progress is already happening. Maybe every podcast, every video, thought, every conversation, every sentence you hear is slowly building something. Instead of asking, did I learn 10 new words today? Try asking, did I spend time around English today?
Because those small moments add up much more than most people realize.
Fluency isn't built in one big moment. It's built through thousands of tiny moments that often feel insignificant, until one day you suddenly realize you understand more than you used to.
So if we simplify everything we discussed in this section, your brain learns through exposure. Familiarity comes before fluency. Understanding 100% isn't necessary. Daily contact matters more than most learners think.
And that's why living with English is so powerful, because English stops being something you study and starts becoming something you're surrounded by. All right? So now we know why daily exposure works.
The next question is, how do you actually do it?
Because most people aren't moving to an English-speaking country tomorrow.
But that doesn't mean you can't bring English into your daily life.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to explore next.
So now we get to the practical question. Because at this point, some listeners might be thinking, okay, I understand the idea. I understand why daily exposure matters. But how do I actually do it?
Exactly. Because when people hear the phrase, live with English, sometimes they imagine something extreme. Move abroad, change your entire life. Study for 5 hours a day. Only speak English.
And for most people, that's simply not realistic.
The good news is living with English doesn't mean changing your life. It means changing your environment.
That's a really important distinction.
Because many learners try to create more study time, but often what they really need is more English time.
Think about your average day. You probably spend time scrolling on your phone, watching videos, listening to music, reading comments, searching for information.
The question isn't, can I find 3 extra hours? The question is, can some of those moments happen in English? And that's where real transformation begins. Not with giant changes, with small shifts.
Maybe your favorite YouTube channel becomes an English channel. Maybe one podcast becomes an English podcast. Maybe your phone language changes. Maybe your daily news comes from an English source.
Notice something. None of these activities feel like homework.
Exactly. You're still living your normal life.
You're simply inviting English into that life. Let's go back to our house metaphor. Many learners think they need to spend more time visiting the English house, but maybe the real goal is to leave the door open.
I love that. Instead of entering once a week, English stays around you throughout the day.
Think about the difference between these two situations. Person A studies English for 2 hours, then leaves English behind. Person B listens to English for 10 minutes, reads something in English for 5 minutes, watches a short video in English, listens to a podcast while walking. None of those moments are very long, but together, English becomes part of the day.
And that's what creates familiarity. Not one giant session, lots of small encounters.
Exactly. Because every encounter sends the same message to your brain. This language matters. This language is present. This language belongs here. Let's compare it to friendship. You don't become close to someone because you spent one entire Saturday together.
You become close because of regular contact, small conversations, small moments, small interactions. over time, the relationship grows.
And in many ways, your relationship with English works the same way. The goal isn't occasional intensity, it's continuous connection.
So if you're wondering how to live with English, start small. Don't ask, how can I study more? Ask, where is English missing from my day?
Because sometimes one small change, repeated every day, can create a bigger impact than a huge study session once a week.
And that brings us to something really interesting. Because when people start living with English, something unexpected happens.
They stop chasing fluency, and fluency starts coming to them.
Let's talk about that.
I think one of the most frustrating parts of learning English is feeling like progress is invisible.
Yeah, you work hard, you study, you practice, and sometimes it feels like nothing is changing.
Have you ever noticed that when you watch a plant, it never seems to grow?
But if you come back a month later, the difference is obvious.
Exactly. Growth is often invisible while it's happening, and language learning can feel exactly the same. Most people imagine fluency as a destination, a finish line, one magical moment where everything suddenly becomes easy.
But for most learners, that's not what happens. Instead, fluency appears in small moments. You understand a joke. You watch a video without subtitles. You remember a phrase naturally. You express an idea without translating.
And here's what's interesting. These moments usually happen after long periods of exposure, not after one perfect study session, not after one grammar lesson, but after months of living with the language. That's why today's message is so simple. Stop trying to visit English. Start living with it.
Because if English is a house, you don't need to renovate the entire building tomorrow. You just need to spend a little more time inside.
Listen a little, read a little, watch a little, notice a little, every day.
And over time, those small moments become familiarity. That familiarity becomes confidence. And that confidence becomes fluency.
So don't ask yourself, how much English did I study today? Try asking, how much English was part of my day today? Because that question can change everything.
Thanks for spending this time with us today.
And remember, don't just study English, live with it.
We'll see you in the next episode. Bye, everyone.
Take care.